Hi, everyone. Welcome to Senior Outreach Mastery. In this episode or in this workshop, we're going to talk about crafting impactful workshops for medical professionals. And basically, what we want to do is show you how to unlock the potential through the power of workshops in the senior health engagement space. So that's a big, lofty title, and it won't fit on a nice little business card. But the short version is we're going to teach you today how to use workshops to get your existing clients to bring their friends and family and colleagues and neighbors to you. So today, my guest Pete Kane and I are going to talk about it. Pete, why don't you first of all introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and why you are passionate about the senior community?
Well, thank you, Jeff, for having me on. So they call me at the senior facility Podcast Pete. I podcast full time, and I podcast my place that I podcast is Overture, which is a 55 and older. So we focus on senior citizens and people, senior living, and with people that do business with seniors.
Love it. All right, so everyone, my name is Jeff, and the reason I am here today, Pete and I had this conversation. I believe that the average small business, the average local business can do better with a good quality workshop than any other way to grow the business. And today, my goal is to share with you why that is and how that is. And for those of you who have watched a previous video, I hope you'll see the transition here. I personally believe that workshops are effective because number one, it makes you more referable. It gives your clients something to talk about or patients, and it helps them bring friends and say, hey, you've got to come meet my person. And one of the things we all need to recognize is that human beings love to feel special. They want to feel they have more status. And if you're the local healthcare provider that gives them status, they're going to bring their friends and family to you over and over. So the reason I'm involved with this and the reason why Pete and I partnered, I'm deeply passionate about helping local businesses. And the number one thing I want to fight is the addiction to being busy. I think a lot of people are just busy and I'm going to say this and probably get some wrath from the big five marketing. I believe that social media is an addiction, and I believe that they have a vested interest in keeping us on their platforms. And really, truly, it's about making another billion, not about serving us. So, one of the things I want to do is help people who care deeply about their patients, who want to help them have outcomes. And my goal is to help you help as many people as possible. Now, I'm going to quote Jay Abraham. He says that if you truly believe what you do can help someone, you have a moral obligation to help as many people as you can. So, workshops, in my humble opinion, if you truly believe you help people, a workshop is the best possible way to show that, and it's the best possible way to help more people.
Totally agree.
So, all right. So let's just jump in. We've opened the box already, so you know who Pete and I are. The goal today is in the next 90 minutes, we are going to teach local business experts, or sorry, local experts, how to grow their business through workshops. And specifically, we're going to focus on those amazing human beings, healers, what have you, that help people live better lives. And specifically, we're going to talk about how do you help more seniors by getting seniors to help you. And Pete, chime in every slide if you've got a question, or I'll go through it. And before I move on, we'll get Pete's
I will.
opinion on things. Um, so this is going to get a little bit confusing, and I want to get this really clear. I'm doing a workshop while teaching you how to run a workshop. And so I'm going to teach you the thing, and then I'm going to break the fourth wall or whatever we want to call it. And then I'm going to say, here's how you can apply it in your business. So, and Pete's got a lot of wisdom. So, between Pete and I, we will make sure you leave with a really clear idea of what a workshop looks like. So, the number one thing, I can't stress this enough, is define the primary objectives. And if I was really, really being honest, define the primary objective singular. Because the more objectives you have, the more diluted things get. So for you, if you're watching this, I would assume your primary objective is to serve more patients. Now, you could put it as you know, want to make more money, you want to be more profitable, you want to increase referrals. At the end of the day, the primary objective is, for me, a workshop should help you serve more people. So the better and more clear you get on your objectives, the better and more clear your audience will be after the fact. And quite frankly, they'll be more clear on who should show up to your workshop in the first place. Now, one thing I want to point out in the medical world, there is this really ridiculous bias towards being a generalist. I serve everyone. Somebody once told me I sell skincare products. I serve anyone who has skin. And my immediate reaction was, well, first and foremost, I don't care about skincare products. So, no, you don't serve everyone who has skin. But also, there's the entire animal kingdom. Do you serve them as well? So be really clear. And just as a really, really ridiculous example, you might treat erectile dysfunction combined with menopause, combined with teenage acne. The reality is, no one person is going to go to your workshop because they need all three of those things. So here's the thing, workshops aren't hard to put on. You can use Zoom, they're free, very low cost, or you could do it in your office or clinic. Have Rather than having one workshop that nobody comes to, have three workshops that three groups of people would come to. The next thing, we want to be really clear on what the outcomes are. So today, my outcome for you is we're going to teach you how to host a workshop that attracts more patients. That's a very clear, specific thing. Again, I'm not listing 50 things. Spoiler alert, if you're in the medical space, I hope you know this already. Human beings have very selective and flawed memories. On a good day, most humans can only remember three things. So try to teach them three things and then send them on their way. You'll do better than if you try to teach them 50 things and they remember nothing.
I
Now,
totally agree. I'm in a senior facility and I see that we serve everybody, and I don't know who to refer them to
mhm,
because when you're too general, the brain doesn't focus on that specific thing that you know that that person does.
excellent. Now, the last point is you want to be clear on why your workshop is important. So, for example, we shared in our previous video why the workshop is important. Today, I'm going to share that if you engage your patients, your best referrals will come from existing patients. And I can't stress this enough. And listen to the whole sentence. Don't jump out and take action. But if you activate your existing patients and you get them bringing you referrals and you do it really well, the beautiful thing is you can start to look at other marketing efforts and you can decide, should I still be doing these? Yes or no. And in my experience, years and years ago, I ran an accounting practice. I doubled every year consistently for 3 consecutive years only by doing workshops. I didn't have any social media, I didn't have any paid marketing. 100% was word of mouth and workshops. Now, the beautiful thing about a workshop is, first and foremost, if you're looking to just grow and clone your existing patients, you can ask them what kind of topics they'd like to hear. You can survey them. You can say, how else can we support you in your wellness journey? The other thing is you can bring in outside people to present to your patients based on other challenges that they might have that you don't necessarily solve, but maybe you're a chiropractor and your patients have muscle pain outside of their treatments. Maybe you introduce them to a good massage therapist. So one of the things I love about a workshop is we can help build value for our medical community. We can introduce our patients to other experts. The other thing is the other experts can introduce their patients to us. And then last but not least, we help our patients build a community. They can bring their friends and family and colleagues to the meeting. So when you think about a workshop, think about who your target audience is. And one of my favorite paraphrases that I have in my world is fall in love with your patient. The rest of your business will take care of itself. So think about ways you can add value to your patient that they would value, not what you value or not what wouldn't cost you a lot. What would your patients value? And this is something Pete and I had a conversation about a long time ago. If you predominantly work with seniors, for example, one of the things seniors value is more time with their grandkids. Or, quite frankly, I'm going to just say this, they want their grandkids to listen to their stories. Well, one of the things you can do that's really fun is you can hire characters from, you know, popular shows, popular movies. I know you can hire Disney princesses, and Pete and I have checked this out in Atlanta. It's not expensive, but just imagine if one of you had a patient appreciation workshop, and you had Snow White or Cinderella serving lunch, or taking pictures at lunch. Just imagine the kids when grandpa or grandma goes home and says, "Hey, look, there's grandpa or grandma with a princess." Pete, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I think one of the big reasons people move into Overture is they may live in Florida or some other area and they want to be closer to their grandkids. So one of the big things is when you have a senior facility, it's not set up for kids. I mean, it's set up for seniors. So attracting the grandkids with something like characters and doing things like that, that is like a magnet bringing them to, unite or visit with the grandparents. So I think it's brilliant. And I think you just have to think about what, let's say, the grandkids want in this situation and what the grandparents want is they want to come together. But if you put something right in the middle, which is Disney characters or characters like that, you're going to have a natural draw for the kids to come visit the grandparents.
Love it. All right, let's jump into the next one. Now, again, I'm balancing doing the workshop with teaching you how to do the workshop, and I hope you see the blend. I'm just going to move our camera here. So, the number one thing you want to think about with any workshop, because spoiler alert, your patients don't care about anything that you care about. They don't care about the excitement you have over the new science or the new tool or the new thing. What they care about the whole time, and you need to be clear on this, what is their life like after you help them? So instead of teaching, and by the way, I've been to chiropractors who do presentations, and they get really excited about the names of the joints and the procedures they do. I'm sorry, the patient doesn't care. They want the feeling of a free moving spine.
Mhm.
And not to put it too bluntly, but most people want to talk about how they select the ingredients, how they put them together, how they mix them, and turn them into a delicious meal, when really truly the patient is literally sitting there starving to death saying, "When do we eat?" So focus on how their life is better. And from a workshop perspective, I love to educate them on how they can best be prepared to work with you and how they can best get ready. So, for example, if you're a physiotherapist, don't talk about the hours and hours of breaking physio where they're going to sweat and they're going to suffer. You want to talk to them about showing up on time. You want to talk to them about, basic things they can do at home, whether it's exercises or maybe it's staying hydrated. What can they do at home to make their time with you, number one, less painful? Number two, more effective, and number three, to get them the best result possible. So, one of the things we want is we want to take their questions. And usually this particular presentation, for example, it's meant to be a 30-minute presentation. As a workshop, it's usually 90 minutes. And the reason for that is in a 30-minute presentation, I'm teaching somebody everything they need to know. But then the next 30 minutes, we're usually getting them to apply it to themselves. So in our live workshop, what we actually do here is it takes longer, but the first 30 minutes roughly are teaching. If I'm being honest, I teach for 10 minutes, I help them apply it for 10 minutes, then we debrief for 10, and I do that 3 times over. Um, as somebody who's watching the recording of this, you have the luxury, you can pause and you can do the homework. But basically, you want to encourage participation. And by the way, one of the greatest gifts you can give your patients and future patients is all of the questions they ask you. Gather those, record them, transcribe them, turn them into a document. The reality is, if somebody asks you questions in your workshop, those questions are your path to gold. Literally, they're the X marks the spot on the treasure map. And what I mean by that is they're telling you up front, these are the questions I have before I work with you. And what that does is by answering that, and by the way, this becomes, people tell me, oh, it's hard to create content, it's hard to do social media. The reality is you're busy trying to be clever and trying to think about what you should talk about to look more clever. Your patients don't care if you're clever or not, they care if you care. So what you can do and show you do actually care is record the answers to their questions, and I promise you you'll get more traction from a 30-second video saying how to ice your injury after physio, or how to hydrate properly before physio, or how to, and here's the other thing, there's a lot of medical treatments out there. I had one, I went to see it, an optholo ophthalmologist. They didn't tell me in advance that they were going to put drops in my eyes and I wouldn't be able to see for 3 hours. Well, I drove because nobody told me not to drive, so I had to sit in their lobby for 3 hours until I could see again. Truthfully, after 2.5 hours, I was like, it's close enough. I can sort of see I'm going to go. But give them all those little surprises that people go, oh, I didn't know that. Do short little videos and say, hey, you're coming to physio today. Here's what you need to do. You're going to the chiropractor today. Number one piece of advice I've heard from many medical professionals, whether it's mental or physical, after the session, drink plenty of water. Your body's going to be dehydrated. So give all of the opportunities, and then again with the senior community, they need to know that you care and they need to know that you're listening, adding in questions and giving them networking opportunities where they can meet other seniors only benefits you in the long run. And again, we want to make sure people know in advance, and again, this is just one of those common sense things. I saw somebody who put on a workshop for seniors and they did it in their sort of workout area of their clinic, and they thought, well, seniors could stand, it's only 30 minutes. Well, the first question everybody had was, where the heck are the chairs? Know your audience, and if it's live, and by the way, seniors, I prefer live because they want to come. Think about it as they need to see how easy it is to get to your facility. They need to see what the facility is like. And a lot of them aren't hanging out on Zoom. So again, when you're in Kennesaw and you're working with seniors, have a conversation with Pete and say, hey, Pete, how could we work together? So, Pete, why don't you answer that question?
I think collaboration is one of the things that a lot of people don't embrace. And when you can collaborate with the right people with your very clear message, there's magic in it. And I've seen people, they they want to tell their audience how smart they are about their service, and nobody really cares.
Yep.
I mean, you might know your service inside out, but you have to put yourself in the shoes of your patients and collaborate with them, because you're basically helping them solve a specific problem that they now know that there's a solution to. And if you can't communicate that kind of message, you're going to put them to sleep.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So here's what I recommend. And we're actually going to walk through this together today.
Mhm.
We want to talk about having a very clear agenda. Because again, if you think about any audience in general, they're there, they want to learn the thing they want to learn as quickly as possible. They want to get on with their lives. So, my biggest advice to you is if you can do it in 90 minutes, ask yourself, how could I do it in 60? If you can do it in 60, could I do it in 30? You don't want to shorten it more than 30 minutes because you want people to feel, and I know this from older people I've worked with, they don't want to be rushed. They've been rushed all their lives. So try to balance it somewhere between 30 minutes and allow 60 minutes and make sure you have some coffee, some desserts. I haven't met a human being who doesn't secretly love a good chocolate chip cookie. Make them feel special. And for the record, I once went to a workshop, I'm not kidding. As people were filing in, the business owner, she walked out with this box full of boxed foods. And while people were sitting there watching, she was very unceremoniously dumping store-bought cookies, store-bought crackers, like everything was dry and stale. Spoiler alert, that was kind of her presentation style as well. You want to have something fresh. And again, people, there's a joy or a transportation back to childhood. One of the secrets of realtors and open houses is the really smart ones. They bake cookies, chocolate chip cookies, in the oven so that that smell fills the air. It actually makes people like you more and
Yes.
more open to buying. So, the first step on any agenda, the agenda needs to be built for the people coming. So, if you're working with seniors, you want to know exactly what do they want to know. And if you don't know what that is, think back to your onboarding or how you meet new people or your first time treatment. The questions they ask, that's what your content needs to be. Now, one thing I would say is you want to make sure your content matches your audience. So, again, you want these things to be friendly to people who have visual or hearing impairments. And so I like to do a little combination, especially when I'm working with an older audience, of having sort of, think about the closed captioning and having more visuals that are big and bold rather than the worst thing you can do is have a list of print in tiny, tiny little words and definitely avoid jargon. Again, I went to see somebody for a spinal injury and I needed to go back home and Google what they said because I had no idea what the person said. And when they said, "Do you have any questions?" My first question was, "What the heck did you just say to me?" So, first things first, run this past a normal human being who doesn't have your years of experience, or you're not going to make sense. Pete, what would you say on that so far?
I'd say it's said on. I heard one person say, I don't know what it was who had said it, but you're communicating on a sixth grade level because simple is good. If you're trying to get too technical with people, you're losing them. So you have to really understand the simplicity of how the brain works, how people digest information. So you're right, because medical can be technical, and I've heard it being technical, and I lose them when they start getting so technical and medical and terms that I've never heard. It doesn't matter that you know everything about your particular medical device or whatever you're trying to communicate. You have to think that the people receiving the information want to understand it, and they want it to be something simple that the brain can understand.
And by the way, if you want examples of what clear communication looks like, just do a search for TED Talks, TED,
Yes.
and watch them, you'll notice that nobody ever goes on to TED, pulls out their slide deck. And by the way, I know I'm breaking that rule at this moment, but the reality is there's more to this conversation than what's on the slides. And you'll notice that without my slides, this doesn't make sense. And without me speaking, it doesn't make sense. So see how the two things come together. Now, presentation skills, again, I can't stress this enough. You are good enough as you are, and that's your starting point. And the reason I say that is a lot of people come to me and say, Jeff, I don't know how to present. Well, here's the secret, I didn't either. Once upon a time, I decided that it was important to my business, and so I started presenting. And the magic was people gave me feedback. And number one, I wasn't as bad as I thought I was. But number two, I could improve one thing each time and I got better over time.
Mhm.
So, presentation skills. There is a book, I think it's from Sandler. It says you can't learn how to ride a bicycle at a conference. So, really, truly, the only way you get better at presentation skills is to do it. Now, here's the beautiful thing. Most people in the medical healing space tend to have a good bedside manner. It kind of makes them stand out. The reality is, people care more about the person presenting, caring about them, than they care about the actual presentation. So make it engaging, make it interesting, tell a joke, tell a personal story. Don't make the mistake of thinking it's about your slides. Everything to do with your presentation is about your audience. Now, the next thing we'll talk about workshop design principles, and we will have some exercises you can do as part of this course. But the most important thing about a workshop design is have a very clear problem that you're going to solve, and then give at most 3 steps to solve that problem. So what are the as the expert, you need to ask yourself, what are the 3 most important things somebody needs to walk away with today and know how to do it? And then just to keep the math simple, I love groups of 3. So you have 1 problem, 3 solutions, and then under each of those solutions, you have 3 tips. So 1 tip might be how to avoid doing something, 1 tip might be how to maximize the value you get from doing something, or 1 tip might be just how to do something a little bit better. So, for example, if you're talking about wellness, one of your tips might be how to get hydrated. And then you might have 3 tips on number one, how do you recognize when you're not hydrated? Number two, how do you recognize when you're overhydrated? And maybe number three is, how do you easily incorporate hydration into your day? So, the goal of the workshop is you're not there to teach them everything, you're there to give them 3 general areas and then 3 action items in each general area. If you do the math, they leave with 9 tips in 3 areas. You've added enormous value if all you do is give them 9 tips. We'll go back and count. I know I've exceeded that, but again, this was intended to be a 90-minute workshop, so I'm intending to go deeper. If you're doing a 30-minute workshop, you might do one big thing, 3 little things, 3 tips. Um, judge it based on your time. But as a rule of thumb, one major thing and 3 tips for every 30 minutes of workshop. Now, the next thing is you want to have presentation and feedback. So at the end of this presentation, you'll see we ask some questions. Think about what questions you'd like your audience to answer to help you generate your next workshop. So again, one of the worst things you could do as a presenter is say, hey, everyone, raise your hand if you'd like to give me feedback. Or, hey, everyone, raise your hand if you have any questions. Nobody thinks that generically. So be prepared and say, hey, I have some questions, or I'd like your feedback on this specific topic. People can wrap their head around it. Now we move into the Q&A session. You want people to focus on how do they overcome their challenges. So, for example, I'd love to go to physio more often, but I don't drive anymore. Oh, did you know? Here's how you can get an Uber quickly, whatever it is.
Mm,
And by the way, bonus points if you can help your patients set up sort of carpooling. And, in Pete's case, we'll talk about it. If you work with a group of seniors from a seniors community, you can arrange busing or, and here's the thing, if they struggle dealing with Uber or taxis or transportation, suck up the $5, $10, whatever it is, and pay for it. Don't let transportation get in the way of them getting the help they need. Because
mhm,
a lot of seniors, they're so used to minding their pennies, um, they'll jeopardize their health and not spend a few dollars on an Uber when really truly you're giving them quality of life coming to see you. So how can you help them get that? And by the way, I'm not saying you run a charity. I'm saying you could make it as part of your service. Oh, for our VIP clients who book more than 3 times a week, we send an Uber to pick you up.
right.
Pete, any
Yeah,
comments on that?
you're dead on. In our community, I would say, I'm just going to guess, 20% don't own cars. They move here, and their kids say, well, you don't, I'm right close by, so you don't have to have a car, but you still got to get around. So Overture is in a densely populated commercial area, but you still have to get around to these places. So you can offer things that help your whoever's going to frequent your business get there easier. We have a golf cart manufacturer that's right down the street, and we're wanting to bring transportation so we can move people that want to get around to the places that they can frequent, because hey, there's plenty of shopping around, and everybody loves to shop, eat at restaurants. So that kind of service can go a long way of making it really nice and easy for people to do business with you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Pete. Now, the last two things, I like to give people some reflection, where they can think about it. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. And I always end, and this is where you can add enormous value to your business and to the businesses around you. Give them a list of resources. So, for example, if you work with seniors and you know that 80% of your patients also go to a chiropractor, also go to a nutritionist, also go to whatever hearing specialist. Give them a list and say, here are 10 in the community that I support and believe in. And a lot of experts don't know. I'm not kidding. I once went to an expert and they said, well, you need to find, I'd had a concussion. And they said, you need to find a massage therapist who specializes in concussions. And I said, wow, that's very specific. Do you know one? No, it's not my job. And I had to go, and believe me, it was not easy to find. And that's the mistake that practitioner made, was thinking, well, it's not my problem. Well, yes, I realize it's not your problem, but here's the thing. If you're telling people to go do something and their treatment hinges on doing that something, it is your problem. But more
Right.
importantly, it should be your pleasure. You should want to make it easy. And by the way, if you tend to send people out for referrals all the time, call those people up that you're sending the referrals to and say, hey, I'm going to be sending you a patient of mine. I'd appreciate just, let's collaborate. We're not going to share confidential information, but let's coordinate a treatment plan. That person, your senior, is much better served if you both contribute and you both communicate and say, here's what we're focusing on. All right. So I gave you the high level overview. Now we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive. And basically, we're going to talk about all of those things we've just touched on in a little bit more deep detail. So think about your seniors. And I want you to understand one thing very clearly. Putting a label on something doesn't mean that all those somethings in that box are the same. And that's the biggest mistake people make in marketing is they think, well, I work with teens, I work with 20 somethings, I work with people in their 30s, I work with 40s, I work with families, I work with seniors. Well, the thing is, seniors technically, if you look at a lot of definitions, is pretty much anyone over the age of 55. And the reality is somebody, you can get your seniors discount in a lot of places at 55. Somebody who's 55 has very different thoughts and needs and wants than somebody who's 65. And somebody who's 75 has very different wants and needs than somebody who's 85, and so on. And the other thing I want to point out, and this might sound a little over the top, but the reality is there's a very different need amongst seniors who happen to be women versus seniors who happen to be men. Now, the other thing is, if you look at people, we're trying to homogenize and throw everyone into one bucket. There's also a difference between people who are agnostic, atheist, or religious. And don't get me started on gender identity and sexual preferences. The reality is, if you have a box, and I'm going to show too much of my humor here, but you have a silver box and you put all your silver haired seniors in there, guess what? You've pissed off everybody who doesn't have silver hair. Some of them have blue hair, some have pink, some have purple. I talked Pete out of bright orange. I'm kidding, Pete. But the
Hey, I
rea
can stand it out.
the reality is people don't identify with the label senior as much as you as a marketer or as a business would hope. So again, back to my comment about people who serve women dealing with menopause, men dealing with erectile dysfunction, teens dealing with acne, three very different buckets. And by
Mhm.
the way, within each of those buckets, very different buckets because, there's young women going through menopause, older women going through menopause. Like, there's so many different health reasons, health causes. So be really clear on exactly who you serve. So, for example, if you're a physiotherapist who serves seniors, you could be more specific and say, I'm a physiotherapist who helps men who've gone knee replacement get back out on the golf course. So that's the specificity we want with our workshop. Somebody can look at it and instead of saying, that's kind of interesting, they're begging to be let in the door because you're literally speaking to them. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with saying, we help Christian golfers golf better after surgery. So be specific. And
Yes.
again, the key is don't be offensive, be specific. You're not saying we exclude, we're not putting out segregation signs and we're not throwing certain groups out. What we're saying is here's who we serve. All others are welcome, but this is who we're serving at this workshop. And as you're building your medical clinic or your practice, you want to be really clear what the niche is that you want to serve. Because here's the thing, the more general you get, the busier you are, the less money you make, and the more frustration and pain you have. The more specific you get, you can guarantee a result for your target audience. You need to be really clear. And the beautiful thing is when you have these workshops, your target audience will tell you why they came. They'll tell you what else they want to learn about. They'll tell you why they want to bring their friends to meet you. Now, the last piece, and then I'll pick Pete's brain here, is an actual exercise. So one of the things we do is we work on what I call is the perfect prospect persona, or in your case, the perfect potential patient persona. And basically, think about exactly who you serve. Do you want to work with men? Do you want to work with women? Do you want to work with people under 65, over 65, over 75? I feel like a really good niche would be working with people over 90 who want to make it to 100. Um, Pick the niche that you care the most about and focus on how can you add value to them. Pete, what are your thoughts?
I agree, and I see it more than I'd like to admit, where when they say who they serve on the podcast, it's so general that it my brain doesn't go to a spot where I really understand it. Because if you say I serve everybody over 55, okay, now I can't really zero in on. It's like, remember, our kids, they come home from school. If you said, well, how's your day? Good. If you said, how did math class go? Did you learn anything in math class today? It gets more specific. You'll get the brain to think about a specific thing, not a general question. And that helps you to really clarify in your mind what the person's asking. So yeah, I love the idea of being really clear. And even though people will say, well, I do other things too. Well, I know that. They will know that. But you want the brain to work in simple messages. And the more you're very specific and simple, the easier for them to refer people to you and to identify with you.
I love it. All right, now we're going to get deep into content creation. And by the way, this is my favorite section because if you get your content right, everything else flows from this and flows smoothly. And by the way, when we talk about content, if you've got a media person, they're probably saying, how can you make more content? How can we make more noise? Here's the beautiful thing: a workshop done well becomes an infinite spring of content. And again, I can't stress enough the power of those questions from your audience. So, the first thing is keep it super simple. So, here's the thing: I once worked with a concussion specialist. And in our first 90-minute therapy session, she spent 85 minutes teaching me everything she knows about concussions. And which is ironic because if she knew one thing about concussions, she should know that people with concussions have short attention spans, we're cranky, and we get fatigued easily. And by the way, we don't remember things. And so at 85 minutes, she paused for a breath. She said, do you have any questions? And I said, yeah, do you have something in writing that I can take home and study for the test? And she was offended. She's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you just gave me an 85-minute lecture on concussion. I'm going to walk out. My wife's going to say, 'How did it go?' And I'm going to say, 'I don't know. She talked the whole time.'" So think about your audience. The number one thing I would say is the content you are creating is for them, not you. So, yes, I assume you're really smart and you know everything about a topic. If you're the expert, keep it super simple.
Mhm.
What's one thing that somebody needs to know today that will make their life better, easier, happier, healthier, whatever it is? And then what are three tips you could give them? Always keep that one, three. And again, your job is not to teach them everything. Your job is to make sure they do the three things that make sure they get the result you want them to. So again, if your goal is to get them back to golf, give them a roadmap. What do they need to do? Tie in, the exercises. Why do they have to do the exercises before they play golf? Because one of the things I've seen with golfers, they're fanatical. They'll do about half the therapy and they say, "Okay, I'm good." They go back to the course, they do something, they tear something, and next thing you know, they're back in surgery. Um, and the reason is they don't believe you're going to get them back on the golf course quickly. So cut out, this is Pareto principle, cut out all the fluff and just say, here are the three steps you need to take to get back to the golf course.
Mhm.
They will follow you, they'll do whatever you tell them, give them the simple path. So our workshop process is super, super simple. We create a title that means something. So the title both explains what we're going to solve and explains who we're going to solve it for. So we want that to be clear. The second thing is we figure out what's the one thing we want them to take away if they listen to nothing else. What is the one most important thing they need to take away? So for me, my one most important thing is you need to prepare your presentations for your specific audience. And then, like I said, once you've done that, the rest of the workshop is what are the three things I need them to do today or tomorrow so that they get the one result I promised them. And like I said, you can do that. That is a 30-minute workshop right there. If you add another 30 minutes, you add another core theme and three tips. So this is the part where, for example, and Pete, you are going to play along just because you were crazy enough to show up. But let's prepare a workshop outline based on something near and dear to your heart. And so if you want to just share something that you'd like to solve for business, in the medical space in your Kennesaw area, and I'll show people what an outline looks like.
I think one of the things we see a lot of is the Medicare. I call it a maze. It was never apparent to me how difficult and complicated it is. And when people are walking us through our options, if we can't make it simple enough for us to grasp, it goes right over our head. But you need to have those three things, the top three things that people will ask when they're making that transition to 65 Medicare. Instead of the way I see it out there is that just doesn't allow us to get our heads around the solution or the simple nature of what they can provide for a person like myself.
I love it.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does indeed. And by the way, that's one of my secrets. I can figure things out. Um, what I take away from that conversation, Pete, is and this is something I know from other practitioners I've talked to, the number one pain is how do we navigate benefits so that you're paying for what you have to pay for, but someone else is paying for what they're required to pay for. And I know this is a big thing both in the US and Canada because before the holiday season, they wrap it up in holiday greetings and Christmas wishes from your local optometrist, our family to yours. But they all have the same message: use your benefits up before the end of the year. Well, guess what the January commercials are? Hey, it's past the end of the year. You're in a new year. Let's use up those benefits before you forget. So, who are those ads targeting to? Who is going to benefit from those ads? The person with the benefits or the person who wants to take their money from their benefits?
Right.
So here's the secret. And by the way, the first time I heard this specific job title, I thought it was brilliant. Now I think, wow, that's manipulative. A lot of companies in the wellness space, they have what they call a wellness coordinator. And isn't this lovely and nice of them? They'll sit down and they'll read your benefits plan for you, and they'll tell you exactly how to spend every dollar of your benefits with them. So I love the outcome of it. I just find it's way too self-serving. But wouldn't it be handy, Pete? Because if you think about it, in Kennesaw, a healthcare provider probably sees a short list of medical benefit companies. So if your client comes in, and I don't know the names, but let's just say here in Canada we have Sun Life, and your client comes in and they have Sun Life for coverage, wouldn't it be nice to give them a little card? Because here's the thing most practitioners make the mistake on. They tell you what kind of treatment you need, and then they say, go talk to your insurance company to see if it's covered, and then your insurance company asks them 50 questions and they feel like they're being grilled like they're somehow on the stand. What if you had a translator from here's our service offering to here's what your insurance company covers, and you map it word for word so that, poor Pete, after he had a medical emergency, he doesn't have to, using his diminished energy, try and figure out how to explain what he has or needs to a insurance agent who is impatient and ready to get to the next call. What if you gave them a little, a business card size saying, "Hey, Pete, you've got X condition. Your insurance company covers this type of thing. Here's the words you need to use. Oh, and by the way, here's the form."
Mhm.
Like, literally, that takes so little effort, and it has a huge impact on, and again, it accomplishes the same result. The patient's going to come back, they're going to get you to do the work for them, but you're not in a manipulative, icky sort of way. And yes, you can have the benefits coordinator, but let's just pretend in a world your benefits coordinator cares first and foremost about the wellness of the patient. So again, you can add enormous value. You can become the expert at that the benefits jargon. And you can say, again, you're a chiropractor. You could say, "Oh, Pete, did you know that your coverage also includes massage care separate from chiropractic? Here's how you can ask for that coverage. Here's what you need to do to get that coverage." Um, my biggest pet peeve, and I'll get on my soapbox for half a second, is medical experts think we're smart enough to go get the treatment they know we need without, number one, telling us exactly what we need, and number two, knowing why that's important. So again, this is something of value you can show to people. If you're getting chiropractic treatment to correct a skeletal problem, you might want to go talk to somebody to correct a muscle problem. Or, the other thing is, maybe some of your problems are caused by a mindset or limiting beliefs. Here's somebody who can help you with that. But the problem is everybody wants to treat the thing in front of them. They treat the symptom. What if we looked at our patient as a human and said, how can we help them?
Yes.
So coming back to that, Pete, sorry, that got me on my soapbox. But basically, if you're a clinic or something, you could create a workshop where you help your patients understand how to navigate the insurance world.
Mhm.
And the three things you could do is, here's how to ask for help, here's what's normally covered, and here's what's usually not covered. That is a really simple workshop.
Yeah. And I tell you, Jeff, I've always kind of had the mindset, try to put yourself in the shoes of the person you're speaking to. And so, how much value can you add to that person? Not looking at yourself and trying to make you look like the expert. Put yourself in their shoes of what issues they have and how can you add value. And just like you're talking about, there's a lot of ways to add value. The more you can add value to that person that's in those shoes that you're talking to, the more they're going to be able to connect with you and be able to embrace you and want to do business with you.
I love it. Now, we talked a little bit about presentation skills, and I'm going to go a little bit deeper. But if you notice, I did the high level, and now I'm doing, here's the high level, which is my title. And now I'm giving 3 tips. And I'm going to go a little less deep from here forward because most of this stuff you can only learn by practicing. But number one thing, as Pete just said, I'm going to quote 2 things. Number one, I believe in the golden rule, which is to treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. I'm also going to share the platinum rule, and the platinum rule is very nuanced. Basically, it says wherever possible, treat others as they would like to be treated. So I love the golden rule. I've lived most of my life with it, but the problem with the golden rule is, again, if I'm a young, fit, healthy person and I want to sit on a body ball, when I treat others the way I want to be treated, I'm going to put body balls out and I'm going to say to my seniors, "Hey, sit on these." And then you got to try really hard not to let them hit the floor when their balance issues kick in.
Right.
So the platinum rule is treating your guests as they wish to be treated. You want to have a good sturdy, and by the way, chairs are so underrated by people who have good healthy spines. they'll put out, I've been guilty. We'll put out the $2 Walmart stacking chairs and, no comfort, no cushioning. Think about your audience. If they've got back pain, you're literally torturing them the duration of your presentation. How could you make them comfortable?
Mm.
So, the beautiful thing, yes, you're there to present. Yes, you're there to show your skills. Ask questions. How could we make this better? By the way, listen to the answers. There is nothing worse than somebody who asks for someone's feedback and then says, and ignores it and moves on. Now, the next thing, and this is really true for seniors, and again, depends on what conditions you work with, give them examples. It's one thing, and by the way, I used to go to this yoga studio, and I left because they had this brand new 20-year-old instructor who could tie herself up like a pretzel, and she'd sit there for hours comfortable, and she'd laugh at me when I couldn't do a basic pose. And I'm like, sweetheart, when you're my age, I hope you're still flexible. But the reality is, you get through a few injuries, you're not. So instead of showing, bringing in your young assistant and saying, hey, buddy, can you demonstrate this? Ask for a member of the audience who's brave enough to demonstrate. Because the beautiful thing about the audience is they'll relate more if one of them actually does the thing you're asking.
Yes.
So that's my big thing. If you're young and fit and you're all kinds of flexible, I just want you to know that just by breathing the same air, you're annoying everybody in the room. No offense,
Yeah.
but try to help see it from their eyes and help them see that you're there to help them.
Yeah, Jeff,
So,
if I can jump in just for a
yeah.
second, because I have a situation. There's a young lady that at the community center that taught the seniors, exercise strategies. And a person came home from that community center and said, you have to talk to Crystal. And the reason why, she told a story of how her mother transformed, who had never been into exercise her whole life, all of a sudden made that transformation and was so excited to actually then start going to the gym. So the seniors that she's talking to can relate to that because that's who they are. But if they looked at her, they go, well, she's too young to understand us. But she used storytelling to draw in her mom, and that connects with the seniors, which enabled somebody to come back to me and say, you have to talk to her, because good storytelling that really addresses your target audience is gonna be remembered.
I love it. And that's the importance of storytelling. Um, you need to tell stories that relate to the audience.
Yes.
A- Again, telling somebody how you ran a 10-minute mile in minus 40, who cares?
Yes.
Again, these people are, I'm not making a joke of this, but some of them, they're just looking to get from the couch to the bathroom without intense pain spasms.
Mhm.
I've been there, and really truly, you talking about your marathon, I want to hurt you.
Yes.
Now, I won't, but yes, just respect your audience.
Absolutely.
Uh, Now, the final thing is tips for confidence and presence. I would say fake it until you make it. If you're nervous, the only thing I can tell you is the only person in the room who knows how your presentation should go is you. So don't let that little inner voice beat you up. Just look for the wins. And by the way, I'm not saying be deluded and say, "Oh, I'm perfect. I don't need to improve." But if you falter or if you forget something, I'll share this story here. I had a script written out for this, and it was carefully laid out. I lost the script, but I know the content so well, I still teach it. I could have not shared that, and nobody would have known the difference. But the reality is, I want to be vulnerable. I want to share. Here's the secret: you're talking about stuff you know, you don't need a script. All you need is to really care about your audience and show up with that mindset. It will help, I promise. Okay, so we've talked about workshop design principles. And again, I can't stress enough, the goal is not to teach, it's not to inform, the goal is to transform. So, the number one thing, if you're in the healthcare profession, your future patients need to believe that they can help themselves and they can be better for having worked with you. The sad thing, and I'm sure Pete will attest to this, a lot of people will put up with chronic pain because they don't know that it's possible to fix it.
Yeah.
So the first thing you need to know is that the status quo is comfortable, convenient, and easy. So you're number one, you don't have any bigger competitor than do nothing. The next biggest competitor is self-help. Oh, I can go to the pharmacy and I can buy this. Um, then after those two things, you get into other people who are your competitors. But here's the secret. If you can overcome the power of inertia, the status quo, you don't have competitors. You are the only option because you're the one who made them believe they could do it. So when you're designing your workshop, think about all of the things that are stopping somebody from getting help. And by the way, it's almost always fear, shame, or the unknown. So if you can take away fear, you can take away shame, you can take away the unknown, people will want to work with you. Now, the next thing, you create a detailed workshop outline, and we'll put this in the notes so that you can do this yourself. But basically, we want what's our title, what's our subtitle, what's our audience, and then what is our core theme, and then what are our three things. And then, if we really want, what are our three tips within those three things? So, plan here's where they are, here's where they need to be. How do you help them move from status quo to the first step? And by the way, if nobody takes you up on your offer, your step was too big. So, just as an example, I know in the spinal surgery space, they don't go from let's diagnose your pain to surgery. There's a gap in there. They do a free consultation where they identify, surprise, surprise, your fears, your nerves, what's stopping you from getting the surgery. And then they introduce you to the surgeon. And then they show you ways to finance it so that you can give $100,000 to the surgeon. If you start with the here's how you can give me 100,000, they're going to go back and say, it doesn't hurt that bad. So think about how you move them to take the first step, not the big leap.
Mhm.
And basically, again, when you're dealing with people, you need to consider that pacing and timing are everything. The average human being, and I haven't updated my results on the survey, but on average, we have a 20-minute attention span. I suspect that that's gotten shorter in the last decade. I don't want to know, so I'm not going to ask the question. But the biggest mistake you can do is have a 90-minute presentation from the lectern, and then you turn and say, any questions? Because half your audience is asleep. So this works with seniors, it works with children. Teach something for 5, 10 minutes, and then give them 5, 10 minutes to absorb it, and then come back and debrief it. You'll be way more effective than if you teach for 30 and then you do for 30. But what it does is gives them a movement break, it helps them shift. And no human being wants to sit completely silent for 90 minutes staring at someone else talking down to them. So how can you bring them? And I think my biggest advice, Pete, your workshop should be a conversation, not a lecture.
Yeah, no, I agree. The brain it works in smaller chunks of time. I take breaks, the Pomodoro, which is, work 45, take a 10-minute break. It's because you got to reset that brain. If you just constantly or have information coming in for 90 minutes, they've tuned you out way, a long time ago. So understand how the brain really works, and you'll keep your audience attention.
And by the way, I'll just share the irony of my concussion specialist, literally an expert in the brain, and she completely ignored all of the stuff she knew to be true. And just as a fun thing, not to pick on her, but she also had this really hard hardwood floor, and she liked the clickety clack of her heels on the floor. And I said, if you insist on wearing those heels, I'm going to go find a different doctor because your shoes are driving me crazy. And she's like, well, I've never. And I'm like, well, you should have, because again, the patients pay your bills. So and it was funny because she made people lie down on the floor. She had like a little mat, and they were supposed to do these mindfulness exercises while she paced in the background. I'm like, lady, I'm gonna beat you with your shoes because you are annoying. Because it was click, 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 click. Try concentrating with a migraine while somebody's clickety clacking around your head. Anyways, I'll get off this. Now, the practical session, and I'm going to demonstrate this, but because it's just Pete and I can't actually do it. For those of you who attend live workshops, what we do is somebody has worked out their outline, they've narrowed it down. And again, I'm condensing this for the sake of teaching as much as possible for future recordings. But basically, what we do is we get our participants to share their mini workshop, and then as a group, we brainstorm ways to improve it. We're going to have a group where people can share and connect and coordinate. That will be in the training materials. But basically, the worst thing you can do is design a workshop in a vacuum. Ask real humans. Next time you see a patient, say, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing this workshop. What do you think of this content? Does this solve your problem? Is this something you'd be interested in?" And basically, all I can say is you need to be flexible, you need to be adaptable, and you need to be prepared that there's always one in the room. They don't care about your slide deck order. They're going to ask you a question about something and they're going to want you to answer it. You're there to serve. So don't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's not in my slides. We can't talk about it." Or, "Oh, we'll get to that later." I like improv. So I'll just say, "Okay, well, let's pause the presentation here. Pete has a question. Just for the record, Pete, I'm going to cover it in about 3 slides. Here's the answer to your question. I'll go deeper when we get to the slide. Is that okay?" Pete's reasonable. He's going to say, "Sure, Jeff."
Absolutely. Yes.
Now, one of the things this is my favorite topic. A lot of people are terrified that they're going to get asked a question they don't know the answer to.
Mm.
And the other is, again, when you're dealing with human beings, somebody's going to have had a bad day. They're going to show up and they're going to ask you questions just to be a jerk. They're there to stump you. Here's the thing: the meanest people I've ever had in presentations, um, they annoyed people around them. So when they were mean to me, people actually rose to defend me. So if somebody's actually a real jerk to you, you can thank them for their feedback and say, "Clearly, this is not for you. I wish you all the well. Please, there's the door. Don't stick around on my account." That is literally, I've done hundreds of presentations. I've had it happen twice. One guy actually called me an effing clown. He said, "I'm not going to sit here and listen to this effing clown." And he muttered it loudly so that we'd all hear. But, he was clearly used to being that smart aleck at the back of the room. And I said, "I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that? I don't think the people in the lobby heard you." And he was so mad at me, he stormed out of the room. And I said, "Now, if anybody else has an attitude like that, please follow him. You two can go be grouchy somewhere else." And we had fun the rest of the workshop because I said, "If you stay, you're promising to yourself and to me that we're going to have fun." And what that guy basically said was he didn't like me because I wanted to have fun. And we weren't going to work together anyways. So feel free to find ways to commonly get people out of the room. But the reality is, the questions they give you, This is the greatest gift they can give you. I don't care who your audience is, their questions are your gift. So have somebody either record it or write it down. The the worst thing you can do is leave a workshop and not have written down your questions that you received, because then you can create social media, then you can create another workshop, answer those questions. And again, don't just answer it and give a resource. Say, oh, by the way, did you know this? Pete, your thoughts.
I totally agree. I heard somebody say one time, separating your audience out, like you said, the person that walked out and just didn't like somebody was having a good time is not going to be a client of yours.
Hmm.
So why do you have to accommodate a person that has that kind of attitude? You don't. So you want to work with the people that have that appreciate what you're bringing to them, and don't be afraid if somebody doesn't want to be there, let them go. You don't have you don't want to feel they have to appeal to everybody. Just appeal to the ideal people that can appreciate your message.
Love it. Now, this slide is not complete in and of itself. It will be part of a future training. One of my favorite resources, favorite books, is a book called Instant Influence by Dr. Michael Pantalon. And the basic background of the book is he helps people uncover their motivation for taking action. And he has a six question step process where people identify their reason for taking action. And here's the thing, most people come across and say, you should do this, here's why. Well, that's your reasons for doing it. So, and we do this in our invitations. We give somebody the six reflection questions they should ask themselves. Why would you want to participate in this workshop in the first place? And then we always end with, why would you want to implement something you've learned from this workshop? Instant influence questions, I've heard people say, oh, it's manipulation. The reality is you're helping people determine whether or not they want to take action and work with you. To me, that is about clarity, not manipulation. So the number one thing I recommend is you have your self-reflection questions, helping somebody who's been to your workshop find their motivation for why they want to implement, in this case, if you're a chiropractor, why would they take the next step, which might be calling you to book an assessment? So that's the thing. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't, but until they decide they want to, they're not going to. So I encourage all of you, and by the way, I use instant influence on myself all the time so that I can really get clear. Do I want to learn this thing or do I not? So self-reflection is huge. And I'm going to wrap up with some learning resources, but Pete, I want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, I think it's I always like the thing when I heard framework of a presentation is so important. You have to think of framing it in such a way that it speaks to your ideal client. It's simple. You're giving them value along the way. So if you're out there just to talk, to hear yourself talk, you're going to lose them, and you're not going to get the referrals to go speak at other organizations, because I think if you make a good presentation and you do it like you've laid out here, Jeff, you'll get referrals to speak to the Rotary, the Kiwanis, the local association, the Cobb Chamber. Different people want good speakers, but you have to have such framework that they want to refer you to others, that because they're always looking for good speakers.
Yep. And the key is good. And by the way, if you serve women over the age of, I think it's 50, you're crazy if you don't look at the Red Hat Society. Literally, their entire thing, they're a fun social club for women over, I think it's 50, it used to be 60. But the reality is, if you're interesting and you've got a good message, people will seek you out. Um,
Yes.
I once did a talk and there was three people in the room. It was booked and I showed up, and then there was a blizzard. And I got 5 speaking gigs out of those 3 humans that showed up in the blizzard. By the way, that's a buying signal.
Mhm.
And I'll put a description of blizzard in the show notes for people in Kennesaw. You've probably seen one in your lifetime.
Yeah, we don't get them very often, about every 10, 15 years.
Let's just say extreme cold and lots of snow and lots of wind. Now, I would be remiss and I wouldn't be following my own principles if I didn't share some resources so that you can learn more about presentations. And my absolute favorite is Simon Sinek. He has a TED Talk, and I can't remember the exact title, but he shares his golden circle methodology, which is why, how, what. And by the way, most people share what, how, why. Nobody cares about your what until they care about your why. So
Mhm.
we have links to these. It'll be in the thing, but your homework is highly recommended. Watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk. Number two, we've got Phil Wacknell, and he has an amazing TEDx. And I think it's called the three magic ingredients of transformational or awesome presentations. Highly, highly recommend it. He's the source of my transform, don't inform. And he's got a 14-minute, it's very, very short, but he lays out his audience transformation roadmap. I recommend all of you learn this if you're going to speak because it helps you identify where your people are, where you want to be, and then the bridge in the middle is what they need to know to get from here to there. And it is short, to the point, and beautiful. Now, my last actual tangible, I am a raving fan of Gar Reynolds. He wrote a book called Presentation Zen. And from him, I learned that if your slide deck has all of your information, why does the audience need you? Give them a book and call it a day. And by the way, that was where Jeff's concept of let's create a book out of a presentation came from. I went,
Mhm.
oh, let's give them the book and the presentation. And then lastly, anything by Talk Like TED, anything around the TED Talks, watch those. It's one idea, one big transformation, and here are some tips on how to get there. There is a formula to great presentations, learn it. Now, Pete, I want your thoughts, and then we're going to talk
Yeah.
about Pete's
When I
podcast.
met you 5 years ago, Jeff, and you started talking about workshops, I had never put the importance of a workshop in such a light that that's a skill you want to learn because a workshop teaches people, it puts you in presentation situations, and it's something that if you perfect and get good at that, you're talking about opening up so many more doors than if you just run around to every association and become like the social club where you have to be everywhere and shake hands with a bunch of people. You want to be able to do business and you're teaching, you're learning, and you're targeting your ideal client. And the workshop in the framework that you've explained it absolutely will revolutionize a person's business if they learn it.
I love it. Now, one of the things that we created this workshop on workshops because we want people who appear on Pete's podcast to get results. And the result, I'm going to just be really blunt. If you're going to be a guest on a podcast, it's because you want to grow your business, or it should be because you want to grow your business. And here's the mistake a lot of guests make is they hope the host makes them look good. The reality is, from a host perspective, you hope your guest is interesting. So, one of the things I would say if you're going to be a guest on a podcast, do the outline that we taught in this course, have your one key theme and then have your three, here's some projects you should work on, and then have some three tips in there. It makes it easy for someone like Pete to make you interesting. But the other thing I would say is you need to be clear on who your audience is, because if you're looking to serve, Pete has a podcast for golfers. If you're looking to serve people who hate golf, Pete's not a fit for you. So you want to make sure that your audience and your offer matches the show you're on. So Pete, I'm going to get you to talk a little bit about Kennesaw happenings in a second, But the reality is, if you work with someone like Pete, who works with seniors, he's got a community, he runs networking events. Pete is well connected in the Kennesaw region in the senior community through his podcast, Kennesaw Happenings, and he's also got Golfer Pete. Pete, what does it look like if somebody wants to be a guest on your show? They've watched this workshop and they're like, okay, Pete, what do we do next?
There's getting in touch with myself or Bartina because we want interesting guests. We want people that add value to the community of seniors, that solve problems, that can talk more than 1 minute. Because if you run into somebody at a networking event, you do your 30-second, message to each other. As a podcast gives you the ability to go deeper and you can share a more in-depth look at what you do. And stories are so critical. Everybody remembers stories. If you're a good storyteller, you'll be effective in communicating your message. So reach out to us. You can go to podcasterpetecane.com. You can go to golferpete.com and or call us at 404-428-3006 and just let us know that you have something that our seniors need to hear.
I love it. And I can't stress this enough. If you've gone through this workshop, I'm going to assume something very huge that I know about you as a human. You want to be better at having a conversation. You want to have more clients, patients, and you want to be a better storyteller. Doing the work of this workshop is invaluable. It will help you in many, many ways. The next step is to find ways to tell your story. And one of the things I do, I help people launch their own podcast. In Pete's case, he's done all the work. You can benefit from being on Pete's podcast. Now, one thing I'll tell you, and I can't stress this enough, and Pete, you can chime in on yours 2 cents. A lot of people come on a podcast as a passive, okay, the host's going to promote it, and there we go. My personal opinion, if that's the way you view your podcast, don't waste anybody's time. Don't go on the show. Because the most important thing you can do is share to the people in your community, whether it's your patients, whether it's your strategic partners, say, oh my God, I was on Pete's podcast and here's what I had to say. That makes you much more shareable because people get a secondhand high saying, "Oh my God, my chiropractor was on a podcast and he mentioned this." So here's the thing, being a guest on a podcast, it's not about how much the host is going to promote the show. It's about how many people you share the show with. Pete.
Totally agree. And I think we are so busy today. We're busy being busy. When you are on a podcast and you create an asset, which a podcast is an asset, you don't want to hide that asset in a closet and lock it up. You want to let your community know. You want to let people know because by listening to the podcast, it's you're educating people that allows them to be connected to you, and it puts you in a whole different position that I see some of them, they just don't share it. And it's like, wow, it's a missed opportunity. So it's podcasting is so beneficial. I call it the new media. It's the most creative way to reach people and to allow you to tell the story of how you help people out there.
Love it. Well, Pete, I want to thank you and I want to thank people who have paid to be part of our program. This is not the end, this is just the beginning. And by the way, this is a really advanced workshop tip. Once you've laid out your one big theme and then your three things, you can have separate workshops on each of those three things going another layer deeper. So start high, get people engaged, get people interested. One other thing I want to share before we wrap up and I give Pete final say is that you can and should charge for your workshops because people will value more if you charge them. Now, I'm not saying charge them a fortune, But let's say you're serving a lunch, a $30 fee to get a lunch and to meet you and meet other people is reasonable. And if you don't want to make it look too bad or too mercenary, you can actually say, and proceeds will be donated to X charity. But the whole thing is get people to pay because they'll show up, they'll value it, and they'll do more with you. Pete, you have final thoughts to our people who are watching this.
Yeah, I want to thank you because 5 years ago, when you shared with me the concept behind the workshop and what really a workshop is truly, not I've heard the word, it will absolutely change your business. If you practice, you get good at holding workshops and delivering a simple, creative message that your audience can take and share. Because if you're good at that, your business will grow very fast.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Pete, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
All right.